Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad to kick off our second to last session today. Thank you all for joining Donor Organizing 101, from donor to donor organizer. Please note that there is closed captioning available for you. All you have to do is click that little box at the bottom of your screen that has the CC in it. My name is Kelsey Barowich, and I'm a program manager with Philanthropy Together. Today, I am wearing a black and white abstract pattern shirt with a plaid blazer that has some dark yellow orangey colors, some purple, some indigos, some greens, yellows, all that good stuff. My background is entirely purple with a circle in the upper corner that says "We Give Summit" in white lettering. I am a white-bodied person who identifies as non-binary. I have very short brown hair, a cross between a boyish pixie cut. And so with that, I'm so excited to welcome you all into this space today. My background is in resource mobilization and donor organizing. So this session is particularly near and dear to my heart. Throughout today's session, get ready to engage. Haley is an amazing dynamic facilitator. So there will be breakout rooms and chat prompts. So come ready to feel energized and really get moving and get learning together. The other thing too, I want to remind everybody is remember to participate in our 2-question poll at the end. And as we've been doing throughout the summit, those of you who stick around will be entered into a drawing to gain a book from one of our amazing speakers for this session, this summit. And with that, I am so excited to pass it over to our amazing facilitator and also an incredible friend of mine, Haley Bash.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. And it's so wonderful to be here with you all today. I am Haley Bash. I use she, they pronouns. I am wearing a zip-up cardigan with a green tank top underneath of it. I am in my living room sitting on a couch with some plants in the background, as well as my dining room table. I have long brown hair that is halfway up with a little hair tie, and I am a white non-binary person. I could not be more excited to be here with you all today and to begin the steps of closing out what a beautiful 3 days this has been together. And with that, I'm going to get us started and share my screen here. Are folks able to see it okay? Amazing. Okay, so glad to hear it. So today we are giving ourselves a bird's eye view on Donor Organizing 101, and in particular, thinking about ways that we can invite people in our community who are donors into becoming donor organizers. And as we're settling into this virtual room together, I would love to ground us in the fact that donor organizing is a very catchy term in our movement fundraising spaces right now. And on one hand, that's incredibly exciting because it's another route, another potential invitation for people to join our movements for collective liberation and change. It also means that we need to make sure that we're grounded on the history of donor organizing and who is actually doing this work. A lot of times without that kind of nuance, we can tend to default toward the white, wealthy, and so-called well-connected to be the focal point of this work, when in fact, the leaders historically and today are the BIPOC folks, immigrants, queer and trans folks, disabled folks, who went into their communities to mobilize resources for social change because they often didn't have other places to go. They weren't able to tap into government or foundation funding, and the way toward their liberation was through their communities themselves. And it happens everywhere. So for me personally, it all started in this photograph that you're seeing here. It is the small dairy farming town that I grew up in northern Michigan. There are 2,000 of us. Folks were really struggling day to day to make ends meet. And in the traditional fundraising mindset, they would never be considered people that you would ask money for. I remember in the local newspaper, there was a front page headline one time that somebody, after they had passed, had given $500 to the local library. And I was like, holy heck, that's so much money. And when somebody went through a place of struggle, say somebody's kid got sick, the first thing that the community did was get together and host a fundraiser together. A spaghetti breakfast dinner combo, pancakes, spaghetti, whatever you want to eat. Getting people together to raise maybe a few $100. And if any of us have been in contact with the US privatized healthcare system, we know that doesn't make the hugest dent in actually paying off those bills, right? But what it really does is it builds relationships and trust and resiliency within our communities, both so that family that's going through it knows that they're supported, and also so if something comes up for us, that we know will be supported too. And so I would love to invite us to think about that kind of possibility in our communities when we're thinking about donor organizing. If I was to say a quote that most matched my definitions of donor organizing and how it ties directly into our movements, it comes for me from Cesar Chavez, who was the leader of United Farm Workers, a Chicano-led movement to organize and ultimately unionize farm workers in the US. Their leadership team came into a juncture point where they were thinking about, as any organization does, how do we raise funds? And traditionally with unions, you often raise funds through membership dues. And the tension point came because farm workers have some of the lowest resource availability of anybody out there. And a lot of leadership was pushing back, saying, we shouldn't charge membership. People are too broke. We should seek funding elsewhere. And Cesar pushed back on that. He said, the statement, they're so poor they can't afford to contribute to the group, is a great cop-out. You don't organize people by being afraid of them. You never have, you never will. So today, we're going to go on a journey together to explore the what's and whys of donor organizing and learn some way to onboard folks that are becoming fledgling donor organizers into our groups. And for us today, this presentation, while it's focused on leaders and members of collective giving groups, this is really for all of us. For those of us that aren't a part of one yet, this can be a great opportunity to reflect on how you would like to be welcomed into a collective giving space, or how you'd like to start one yourself in your own community. So the what's and whys of donor organizing. We can look at some two separate words here, some definitions, and put it all together. We look to our left, donor, straightforward English dictionary definition, right? Somebody that contributes something, such as money, to a cause. Know that there's not any minimums there. Anything above $0, you're a donor. And when we think about it that way, pretty much most everybody that we know is a donor, right? So when we think about donor organizing, let's not automatically take people out without checking in with them first. We need to have people have the agency to be able to say yes or no to our invitations. Organizing, this definition comes from also a former leader of UFW, Marshall Gans. He is now at the Harvard Kennedy Institute. And for those that are aspiring or current movement research nerds, it's a great source to go to. And his definition is leadership that enables people to turn the resources that they have into the power that they need to make the change that they want. When we put this all together, what donor organizing is it's leadership. It's leadership that enables our people to contribute what they want, what they have to make the change that they want by resourcing those causes. So it's them inviting their communities in that otherwise wouldn't be invited. We've talked some about donor organizing history, but I really do want us to be grounded in some other examples that have come up throughout time, and in particular, the biggest inflection points that we think of when we think of social movements. There's some lenses that a donor organizer have that we like to reflect on, and it's in particular, is it a liberatory sort of lens? Are you part of the people on the front lines that are fighting for your direct liberation? Is it a solidarity lens? Are you supporting those on the front lines because you know that all of our liberation is tied to one another, that we become free when we're all free? And no matter what that is, these people did not wait and rely on wealthy philanthropists to suddenly get it. They mobilized their people. A couple examples, civil rights leaders in the South wanted to host a bus boycott, right? And when you think about a boycott, that means that people who use buses, because oftentimes they don't have cars, are not going to be using buses, but that means they can't get to work or childcare or other things that they need. So what they did was they would pass the bucket in Black churches and in organizing meetings to fund the carpools that were needed. So either for folks to hire cabs or to be able to have people in the community put gas in their tank and drive folks around to end segregation laws in the South. In the 1800s, in a very different spot of the country, in the East Coast, Quaker women in Boston and Philly sold quilts to fund the movement to abolish slavery. And they did it through some pretty creative tactics. I mean, they would sell the patterns, they would sell the full quilts, and they would insert in the quilts that they sold ways to get a hold of them. So if somebody else wanted a quilt to be sold, so that they could do that. So even before the days of social media and the internet, it was happening. I would love to hear from you all. If you would like to share in the chat, what are some movement wins from over the years that feel most special to you? Upholding transgender rights in Massachusetts in 2018. That's a huge one. And it's so exciting that you were able to be directly a part of that, Kelsey. I know for me, I'm rooted in Oakland, California, which is the birthplace of the Black Panthers, and their work to fund their free breakfast program actually came in part through selling organizing pamphlets to students at University of California, Berkeley. So not only were they able to make sure that their kids were fed their free breakfast, they also had the opportunity to be able to bring their theory of change around Black liberation and Black power to student organizing contexts. Oh my gosh, there's so much coming through. Yes, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta ending money bond here in Illinois. Yes, I was just in a training with somebody who was also a part of that. Wonderful. Women's right to vote, poor people's campaign. Oh, yes, gay marriage, absolutely. I hope you all are taking a moment to think. I know sometimes especially for those of us that are organizing, it's tough out there and the challenges continue to feel insurmountable, but thinking about all the times that we have pushed back and been able to get victories for our people, that's not something to scoff at. You did not come to a training thinking you're gonna get some homework, and this is optional. Nobody's gonna check in on you afterward. But if you would like, I would recommend you do an online research activity for a social movement cause that either you brought up here in the chat or that you're kind of thinking about behind the scenes that might either tie directly to the collective giving work that you're doing or something that you want to be inspired by. See where that money came from. When I was talking about the Black Panthers, that money came from students at Berkeley, and the tactics that they used, it was also an organizing and base building tool to teach them the how-tos on organizing. Think about the fundraisers, the donors, and what they were like. Yeah, absolutely, Kathleen. And SARS in Nigeria, super, super inspired by it as well, watching from afar. So why donor organizing? Tough to put it just on one slide, but here we go. First that comes up for us is, of course, resourcing our movements. And we all know this one here, right? We need to make sure that we have organizers knocking on doors, that we have the signs to be able to take to rallies, and all of that takes resources, and that those investments build power and systems change. What isn't as talked about when we think about donor organizing that I would love for us to think about in our work is really inviting people wholeheartedly to join in our movements where a donation is just one step, because not every one of us is going to show up for an advocacy day or show up to a protest. Oftentimes, if you think about the church or synagogue fundraising committee, the folks that want to make the food to sell at the community event, or the party planner type folks, those people start coming out of the ether when we have opportunities to resource. And those opportunities become leadership. And finally, when we think about all that we did, all that we put our heart, our sweat, our tears into, we want to know that we showed up in our fullest capacity to win. So onboarding time. So we're thinking about, we have these people in our communities that have been contributing, that are interested in what we are doing. We would like to figure out how they can step up more. Let's talk about that. And this framework here that I'm about to show comes from the history in labor organizing, where there's pretty high stakes at hand. They can't just sit around and be like, hey, who would like to lead this thing? Raise your hand, because what they are doing is focusing on getting workers to unionize. And the risk at hand is that these workers can get fired. Many workers have lost their lives in the process of attempts for unionization. And so their first step is actually identification. What's really beautiful about this, thinking about which possible leaders should we focus our attention on, is it allows us to step away from what disproportionately is the confident cis white man raising his hand for leadership and thinking about what are our values as a collective group? Who would we want to represent us as a leader? And who do we want to contribute their voice, their experiences, their skills into our spaces? And also just how do we define leadership within our context? Once we've sort of thought about that, then we think about an invitation. So this one's actually, kind of just a straightforward ask to make an ask. You can pull somebody aside, say at a gathering, and say, hey, I really appreciated you mentioning X. Our organization's thinking about expanding our leadership, and there's some opportunities that I could see you playing a great part at. Would you be able to talk about that next week? What comes from there is a first offer and first ask. In labor organizing world, this is often called structure tests. And this is sort of a light-based approach to be able to kind of check in on whether it's a mutual fit for both. And so in union workplace context, what they'll often do is ask the potential leader to get a certain number of people to wear a union pin during a workday. And that has some risk involved because it is showing to your bosses and your fellow coworkers that you're pro-union, but it's also not the highest possible stakes, right? So you can kind of get a survey of the room of, is this person seen as a leader by their peers? Are they able to carry through on what we're asking of them? This might be something for a collective giving group that has public events, thinking about, oh, can you invite a few friends to our next event? And a piece of that is offering some support. And that support might look something like, oh, don't just rely on emailing them. Make sure that you do calls for follow-up, or the next time that you see them in person, you check in with them to confirm their RSVP. And finally, this is where the nuts and bolts of the rest of our training today is going to be focused on. My favorite part is the onboarding and ongoing support. So once we've identified that leader, they've said yes to our dress, and we want to continue forward with them, how do we support them to bring out their greatest leadership potential? The way a donor organizer hub that we like to think about onboarding folks is through the lens of using what's called public narrative. This also comes from Marshall Gans of UFW and now is a part of the Harvard Kennedy School. And it goes into three parts: the story of self, story of us, and story of now. Story of self is who I am, so my values, my experiences, why I do what I do. Story of us, our shared values, our shared experiences, why we do what we do. And the story of now. So this gets into transforming our present tense into the moment of challenge, hope, choice, change. And so we do this in 4 steps, and I'll kind of walk us through. I know this is quite the big table here, but the way that we think about it, oftentimes traditionally, when we have volunteer fundraisers that are excited to raise their hands, a lot of folks will skip to step 3. It's like, oh great, let me hand you the house party toolkit. Let me give you the copy paste blurbs to post on social media. And some folks that are very eager and confident in their leadership will go out and do it, but often it's not as many folks as we'd like. And so we always recommend these first steps, which really help people dig into both their own personal relationship with resources as well as their relationship to the broader movement. So this first step here, personal money history, what this is intending to do is to help us transform a relationship of anxiety into a relationship of empowerment when we're thinking about money and talking about it. Stakes at hand is where the story of us piece comes in. What becomes possible if we all can contribute what we can? So that gets into the intrinsic motivation where people can start seeing as budding donor organizers, oh, this is the role I can play, rather than the sort of bait and say, like, did you reach out to your 10 people kind of checklist energy that nobody really enjoys doing? Third step, that's where we get into tactics. And tactics, a lot of times it's like, oh, do we do the house party? Do we start a giving circle? Whatever the tactic is. Actually, in terms of tactics, we recommend grounding in terms of how do we want to spend time with our community? How would we like to invite them to join us? And so that's where you get to incorporate people's skills and interests that they inherently have. Role play and practice is a sort of skill expansion exercise. All of us are gifted with a lot of wonderful things that already make us great organizers. And there's always opportunities to sort of sharpen our toolkit. And so this comes from a place of particularly the areas of donor organizing where things are a little more difficult. Oftentimes for people, it can be the fundraising ask. And in these sorts of cases where we're overcoming difficulty, we find that it's very useful to experience both the person that is doing the difficult thing, which is asking in the case of making an ask, as well as the person being asked. In this particular case, what often happens is that people will realize, oh, my friends aren't going to auto block me if I ask them for money. It's really nice to feel asked. It's really nice that in our relationship, you trust me to share about what you care about most, and you want me to help out. So if we dive in a little bit, personal money history. So our definition of this donor organizer hub is our personal experiences with class, income, and wealth. This does not happen in isolation from other aspects of our identity and experiences. So our race, our gender, our sexuality, our disability status. It is thinking about our wholehearted relationships and experiences with money and working through it both within ourselves, but also sharing with each other, because we are very socialized to not talk about money for all the reasons that we all know. By starting with money histories, you can develop new relationships to fundraising that's joyful and that's rooted in relationships. And so we're going to do that just for a tiny little bit today. For a few minutes, we're going to get in a breakout session to answer one question with one another. Have you received a transformational gift of money? And what was that like? It doesn't have to be a huge sum. It could be a roof over your head, could have been a loan, just something that makes you feel like, wow, that was really meaningful to me at that time. I am so happy that was given to me. So without further ado, I'm going to ask for our tech folks to get us into breakouts, and then we'll join back up together in a few minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed a brief moment of reflection and a little less of me talking at you. I know this was just a small soundbite, and it's not like we're going to have our personal money histories revealed in just a few minutes. In the chat, there is a money history exercise that we'll often do with folks at Donor Organizer Hub, bring it to their groups to work through together or for people to work through independently. And I offer it as an invitation for you all if you want to take it into your communities and do a deeper dive into your money histories and sharing it with one another. As we move forward into the process of onboarding the new folks coming in, The next step, stakes at hand, is an opportunity for us both individually and as a group to really be frank of why we're all here. And as we're going through these questions together, if something speaks out to you to want to answer that in the chat, please feel free to. But thinking about what does it look like if we win? How will money help us get there? And a personal favorite of mine, and this is especially, I feel like, a lovely conversation to have with those of us that are working through our relationships with money and how we're kind of feeling about it around organizing spaces, is like any good organizer, let's think about who benefits. Who benefits from social justice leaders feeling weird about money? Curious if y'all have thoughts, feel free to share in the chat. The third step is tactics. And tactics, oftentimes, as I was mentioning before, we tend to be rooted on, in the transactional world, let's call it, and conversion rate, so to speak, like what is most likely to get somebody to donate. And it's very removed from the relationships and trust that we want to build if we're inviting people into spaces. So thinking about goals beyond dollars raised, who would we like to spend more time with? What would we like to do together? What would we like to learn together? And how would we like to grow together? And how would we like to invite others into our organizing work? And this can be surface or deep level here. I appreciate Penny's annotation here, beautiful art. And it could be as honestly, carefree and fun as we need. Oftentimes in our work as organizers, it can be traumatic, it can be exhausting, it can be all encompassing. And oftentimes there is not as much of that spaciousness for us to think, where can there be joy in community building and what we're doing? And so with that being said, I feel like if I didn't show you all some opportunities and tactics that are common, you'd be like, well, what do you do with people? This is just a very small subset of ways that you can gather with people. And it's graphed out lower effort, lower reward to higher effort, higher reward. But in particular, I don't want us to think about any sort of value assessment with this, that we should always think about higher effort, higher reward. Because if we're thinking about building lifelong organizers, there are different inflection points in each of our lives where we're more open to trying new things and challenges and take on bigger roles in leadership, where we might be toward the right here. We just retired, or we took on a less demanding job, or we just started a new school, just something that where there's a change that allows us to open up more. There's also inflection points where our changes make it so that we have less capacity, where I have a new dependent, or I'm taking on a more serious paid labor role. And so thinking about those opportunities for folks to plug in so that they don't have to fully step away from us in the times where things are busier for them. They might not be able to do all the things, but they still want to be able to be that particular node in connecting their communities to our work. So role play and practice is such a favorite, particularly when thinking about skills that are in the sort of growth area for our communities, and thinking about where we might be a little afraid, not totally panicked, but just a little bit that combination of excited, curious, nervous. And so the first step of that is learning, which we're in that step kind of entirely today, where I'm showing you a visual aid, I'm walking you through the what's, whys, and hows for donor organizing, but it could be applied to any type of skill-based training that you're thinking about, whether it's direct action security or making a fundraising ask. There's a broad array that this can be applied to. From there, being able to have participants have the opportunity to sort of fishbowl and witness you participating in that leadership practice. From there, being able to practice themselves and getting that opportunity to sort of feel it in their body, just like, oh, the nerves are rushing up, I'm doing it. Oh, wow, nothing really terrible happened. Cool. The fourth step, debrief. I have a controversial take here that I'm going to share with you all, and it comes from an organizing mentor of mine who, there's no exact science to back this up, but he strongly believes that we don't actually learn by doing. We learn the most through reflecting. And so giving that opportunity after we've had that space where we have been a little more vulnerable, where we are trying something new, to kind of name the elephant in the room and just be like, that was weird, but maybe not the weird that I thought it was. Or, went into this thinking I was going to be most nervous about X, but it ended up being Y. Just being able to talk about it and then allowing for people to think about, okay, given where I'm at now, what does this mean for my next steps in my donor organizing journey? And so this is a big slide. We're not expected to memorize. You're going to get these slides after this session, I am sure. But just to say that oftentimes when we think about training donor organizers, it's often fundraising tactics, which is the second on the left. And that's important. I'm not saying we don't do that, but thinking more broadly about how we train our people, but also support our people, honor our people, watch them grow, be there for them when they are, in a tough spot. And so there are opportunities for community and celebration, for personal narrative and transformation, leadership development, emotional support, accountability and logistics. And this little tool here is not meant to be like run through a checklist and do these, or these are the limited possibilities, because really the limit here is your imagination. I would love, as we are closing out today, in my speaking portion of this, for you all to share in the chat either one thing that you're taking away from today or one thing that you're leaving behind from today.
Haley, knowing that we have a little bit of time left, I think we have about 5 minutes before I need to wrap up. I would love to ask you to like share a story, whether it's like from your work directly with donor organizers or even like personal donor organizing that you've done, like a moment that you were just kind of like, oh, whoa, this really, really works. Like, I know you shared that at the top, but maybe even something more recent if you have one in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Last month, I did a personal money history exercise, the sheet that I believe has been shared in the chat, or if not, will be soon, with a group that is based in East Oakland. And it was a multi-generational, multiracial, and cross-class space. And initially, folks were really nervous to, open up in that kind of way, especially, in a colleague context. And so the way that we went about it was initially folks sort of journaled it out, and they were able to sort of pick pairs that they wanted to kind of debrief it with. And then we brought it to the larger room, and the connections that people made about where their awkwardness or their feelings of trauma or their feelings of just like, I don't know if I want to do that, were coming from. And watching them shift from feelings of ugh to feelings of, oh my God, the reason why I am upset when talking about money is exactly the reason that I should be helping raise resources in my organization, because I believe so strongly in our mission. Just watching that shift happen in an hour time, and I'm not trying to false advertise a cure-all where you host an hour session with your people and suddenly they're magically transformed, because it's ongoing work. When we talk about this, I gave a 1, 2, 3, 4-step process. We're always returning to those steps, but starting to deepen in on unpacking those layers can oftentimes you shake a little bit off and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much here. I am a donor organizer. I can do this.
I love that. That is phenomenal. We did get one question in the chat that I saw. Have you ever held donor organizers for families or kids? How might that be different? And so I think, the question here is like when you're seeing an intergenerational context or when you're seeing a younger context, what tips and shifts would you recommend?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, all of this here is meant to be applied to your personal context and thinking about how do people want to show up and spend time together in terms of with families, any kind of event, having that childcare, but not only childcare, it's an opportunity for kids to kind of get into community organizing 101, or delving a little bit into, how we as humans resource one another to show caring for one another. Such a great combo. in terms of kids, there's such a broad definition of kids, and we're depending on age bracket here, but really thinking about both facilitated as well as unstructured activities, because kiddos like the unstructured time that can really celebrate and honor the concept of being in community and enjoy together. That can be a little bit of a distinct space during the times where we're feeling particularly stressy and overwhelmed in our organizing work.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I know for me, as someone who comes from a background of organizing, I always love to see it applied to money. Oop, you can tell that I have my alarm set to send you a reminder. But I always love hearing the donor organizing piece of this, because in reality, right, so much of our work is rooted in relationships and building. For those of you who were with me on my panel, we know that this is everyday stuff. We don't have to necessarily overthink or overcomplicate, because it comes down to, Haley, I have a relationship with you and I really care about this one thing. And I know you also might care about this one thing. Will you chip in $5 because we both care about it and it's something exciting for us, right? Like, we've built that trust, we've built that relationship. Oh, thank you so much. Okay, so hello everyone again. I have been bumping around this whole time. I'm so glad that you came to join us today with Haley. Haley truly is an amazing speaker, an amazing facilitator. I highly recommend you check out their organization, Donor Organizer Hub. They have been doing amazing trainings. Really, really, really support them. And love partnering with them in every single thing that we do at Philanthropy Together. Hopefully, we'll be able to continue our partnership. So if this is something that you are excited about, please let us at Philanthropy Together know, because I would love to see more partnerships between donor organizers and giving circles and my team and group. I am so excited to share this poll with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Y'all are at our last session coming up. We've had so much amazing, beautiful time together, learning from experts in the field, practitioners, amazing folks that are doing great work like yourselves, like everyone else. Specifically, our next session coming up is going to have the Glide Ensemble and Change Band. So if you are ready to get energized, to close out with a bang, really enjoying our piece, like find a way to close out, let's do it with some art. The last session specifically is seeding, funding, the next big ideas, visions, and organizations. Again, I am so excited to be with you all today. I'm glad you are here. It has been such a pleasure listening to Haley and getting to see her do like the best work ever. You can tell that we're friends. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. And give me 1 second. I just need to find the name of our raffle person. And I will pass that along. So with that, if we want to get the music going, I will drop in the chat or come off unmute again to share who the winner of our raffle was today. Okay, ooh, I have the name. Drum roll, please. The winner today was Deborah Scott. Deborah, somebody from my team is going to be in touch with you, and you will be able to pick a book from one of the amazing speakers that we've had. Congrats to you, Deborah. Do a little dance in your chair. And Haley just shared the slides in the chat, so if that's something you want to go back to, definitely click those slides. And with that, let's cue that music and get ready to end We Give Summit. Thank you all.